7 years ago, my life was marked by turmoil, inactivity, and indecision. I didn't really know where to turn. I went to a dear friend of mine who had helped me many times before and was sort of my mentor in life. And I asked him a question. Don, I don't know where to go from here. My life is marked by fear, anxiety, and guilt. And for the next hour, my good friend heard my story about why, through the law of decay, really, I had slipped into a process of disillusionment and a bit of depression. Don listened to me as a good friend would, with active involvement, not passive detachment. And at the end of that time, Don looked at me and he said, Randy, you have violated one principle, and this principle makes all the difference in the world. Now, it's a good thing that he did not give me 10 principles to implement, but he gave me one. If any of you have ever seen that movie, City Slickers, there is a scene in that movie where an old crusty cowboy is riding along with a city slicker. And this old crusty cowboy is having a dialogue with the dude that comes to the dude ranch. And Curly, the old cowboy, says, you city slickers are all alike. You spend 51 weeks in the city and you come up here for 1 week and you expect to find peace. The city slicker, played by a fellow named Billy Crystal, said, you're right, I do expect to find peace. And he said, I'll tell you how you can find peace. And the old cowboy looked at him and he said, it's this. And the young city slicker said, your finger? He said, no, not my finger, you idiot. It's just one thing. Billy Crystal said, what is that one thing? He said, you'll have to find that out on your own, but it's just one thing. You know, I've discovered in my life that it's not 40 things I dabble in, but it's one thing I do that really matters. Our mission in life is to find the one thing, to narrow our focus, to be a laser rather than the sun. It's to be able to do one thing very well rather than lots of things not very well. A friend of mine said it best. He said, you know, you do more by doing less. Finding our strength, finding our passion, finding our calling is one thing. But I had lost sight of the goal. I had lost sight of the finish line. And Don said, Randy, there's one thing that you need to remember. I was grateful for that, but I was now listening. What's the one thing? He said, the issue in life is always who is in control. Okay, I said. He said, the issue in life is always who's in control. I got it, Don. Can we move on? He wanted to make sure I understood that there is a big difference about who's in control and who's out of control. And here's what he said. The number one principle of life, to have mental health, is to know the difference between goals and desires. And you, he said to me, have mixed them up. No wonder you're struggling. I had no idea what he was talking about. And he began to explain to me a principle that has changed my life in the area of planning, that has led to increased productivity and prosperity for me personally and peace in my heart. Because I have discovered that there is a big difference between goals and desires. And when you understand the difference, it will make all of life make sense. Here's what he asked me. He said, Randy, is it a good goal for you to have a terrific marriage? You've been married to Kathy for 24 years at the time. Is that a good goal? And I said, well, sure, that's a good goal, Don. He said, is it a good goal for you to raise your 3 children to be great model citizens? You have Whitney and John and Mindy. Is it a good goal to raise them to be good kids, to be good adults? I said, well, sure, it's a good goal. And very gently he said to me, I don't believe it's a good goal at all for you to have a great marriage or great kids. I think it's a desire, not a goal. Why? Because your spouse and your children are out of your control. And then he went ahead to ask me some other questions that began a process of thinking that's changed my life. He asked me this: are you aware of the Serenity Prayer? And I said, I think so. He said, can you quote it for me? I said, I'll try. And I started off, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And as I stumbled through that prayer, Don said, that is the cornerstone principle of life. Right there. Knowing the difference about who's in control, what you can change and what you cannot change, and knowing goals and desires will allow you the discernment to separate the two out. He said, Stephen Covey has said it well. The gate of change can only be opened from within. Meaning, you can't force another person to do anything. You can influence them, perhaps. You can attempt to persuade them, but you... Then Don said, here's how I would define a goal and a desire. Listen carefully, and if you would, write this down. A goal is that which you alone own and you alone can accomplish. It is dependent upon no one else. But a desire, he said, is just the opposite. A desire is that which is out of your control and is dependent upon someone else to help you accomplish it. In other words, a goal you alone control. A desire is out of your control, dependent upon someone else to help you pull it off, to accomplish it. That definition began a journey for me that over the last 7 years has caused me to replace fear, anxiety, and guilt with a sense of drive, passion, and focus, which I believe is necessary, assuming you've got the right market and you've got the right product, to take it to the next level of productivity. And I believe knowing the difference between goals and desires is critical to planning for productivity. It is the reason why I plan now with those two in mind. I said, Don, tell me more, tell me more. He said, you must understand, Randy, that there are 3 principles that drive goals and 3 that drive desire, and they are different. He gave me the first one, when it comes to goal setting. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, everything I had heard up to this point was wrong. For almost 50 years of my life at this point, what I had heard was wrong. I had been attempting to do things that were out of my control and frustrated when it didn't happen. Devastated when it didn't happen. Not just disappointed, devastated. I wanted to quit many times because I thought it was my fault. I had done all I could do. But it didn't happen. The results weren't there. So I struggled. This set me free. And you know what? The truth will set you free. And suddenly it was like my eyes were open and I got it. My prayer is that you listening to this will get it too. It is the #1 principle for personal fulfillment and professional productivity. What is it? The first principle in goal setting is this: you work for goals. You work for goals. Secondly, goals have to do with activities, picking up the phone, going to see someone for an appointment. You translate the work into activities. Third, a goal is scheduled and it is predictable. Scheduled and predictable. A goal has to do with time management, and we control our time. To say you do not have enough time is not a statement of fact, it's a statement of value. We all have 24 hours in a day. It's how you use that time. So you can schedule a goal, and it is predictable, because you alone can control what? Your own behavior. You work for it, and you schedule the activities, and that's good goal setting. 3 principles: work, activities, it's predictable. The other side of that coin, desires, it's just the opposite. First, on a desire, you don't work for desires. You pray for desires, because a desire is out of our control, so we pray for a higher source to intervene on our behalf. Second, you not only pray for a desire, but a desire has to do with results. Results of the activities. Results many, many times. In fact, I'd have to say the majority of times in my life come out of the blue. It's almost like the best marketing plan I know is when I pick up my phone and say, Marshall speaking, and the person on the other end of that line says something like this: you know, when you approached me before, I wasn't ready, I didn't see a need, but something happened recently that changed my mind, and I'm ready to talk. Now suddenly, am I a genius? Because circumstances in that person's life compel them to call me. No. I planted the seed. I made the presentation. I did all I could do. I did my best. But the fact of the matter is, it came out of the blue, and that leads me to the third principle. True desires are unscheduled, and they're unpredictable. They will happen when sometimes you least deserve it, and sometimes you least expect it. Isn't that the truth? So, desires you pray for, they have to do with results. And they're unpredictable, and unscheduled. It's like the farmer. A farmer plants and waters and cultivates the crop. The farmer does all he or she can do. But that farmer is dependent, no matter how excellent that person is, on outside sources, namely the weather. Many times, and you've seen this, and in my own state of Texas, we saw this several years ago, where farmers would plant, and generations of excellent farmers would plant, do all they could do. They'd get up early, they'd schedule the work. They predictably do it every single day. They'd done it for generations. But you know what happened? 75 days of 100-plus temperature swept across the state, scorched the land, and killed the crops. Now, is that the farmer's fault? No. Was the farmer successful? Not at that time. Was the farmer excellent? Yes. The farmer did all he or she could do. They met their goals. However, their desires were certainly not met. Why? Because those results were out of their control. I'll ask you a question. Have you ever been excited about something, taken it home, you've shared it with your loved ones, and it's been met with indifference and basically, who cares? I was excited about this concept. I had started to see some fruit in terms of my own life and business, and I took it to my house, where home is really where life makes up its mind, and I was excited to share the #1 principle for mental health. However, as I gathered the troops with 3 children, Whitney, John, and Mindy, and Kathy, they didn't seem very excited at all. Their minds were far off. They wanted to do other things, and when I gathered sort of the family council, they asked penetrating questions like, how long will this last, Dad? Is it going to be more than 10 minutes or so? I've got to make a phone call. I've got to be here and there. Well, I was not very motivated, but was excited about sharing this. And they would say, I wonder what tape he's been listening to lately, or what book he's been reading. But I began to share the principles of knowing the difference between goals and desires. And they were less than enthused. I said, listen up, gang, this is terrific. Do you realize the #1 principle for mental health is to know who's in control? And a goal is that which you alone can do and you alone can accomplish. But a desire is opposite of that. It depends on someone else to help you pull that off, to accomplish that. And that's out of your control. And they would have great responses like, Well, I decided to go with the extended lecture, and I got out a flip chart. I took the flip chart and I set it right here, and I drew arrows and charts and all kinds of things, and they were still disinterested. And then I decided to do the workshop experience. So I got out a huge container. It was actually an empty fish bowl, and I put it on the counter. And I decided to draw names. And I'd gone over the 3 principles of a goal and 3 principles of a desire, and we were going to become partners as a family. And over 21 days, we would hold each other accountable for our goals, work, activities, and schedule. We would pray for each other in the area of desires. And that's the principle that I want to hammer home the most. You work for goals, you pray for desires. Work for goals and pray for desires. And don't get them mixed up. That's the essence of this message of planning. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all New York Life ever asks of you. Do your best. And if you do your best and hold tight to the goals and hold loose to your desires, good things will happen. Let me share from my heart. Never become attached to outcomes. They're out of your control. Do what you can do and leave the results with a loose hand. You're not in control of those. All you can do is your best. I'm not saying you'll always hit and always hit home runs. I am saying you'll strike out far less frequently. And I can guarantee this. If you do all you can do, even in the midst of the toughness, you may be disappointed, but you'll never be decimated. You'll never want to quit. Knowing who's in control, that's the issue. I'll close it with the prayer that I pray every day. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It might be a good prayer for the lips of every New York Life agent. Thank you.